October 11, 2022. How are you? It's been a while since we came out here live. Will Republic Act 11934 or the SIM card registration act work? So Jason here for the Hagbayon Channel and TMS Talks. This YouTube channel is devoted to current events, literature, rock music, the outdoors, blade culture, prepping, survivalism. So will Republic Act 11934, otherwise called as SIM Card Registration Act, work? Suppose you receive a death threat via SMS, or if not a death threat, you receive a defamatory remark, or some sexual innuendos, a form of sexual harassment, or you receive some messages that would be tantamount to a scam. What will you do? Well, as a matter of course, the first thing we should do is to make a screenshot of the electronic evidence and make a blotter with the uh, corresponding law enforcement agency, say the Philippine National Police. So you'll make a police report, and now the PNP will write the telecom company of the user or the owner of the number, okay, to request for the account details of the mobile number used by the perpetrator. And the PNP now will facilitate the filing of formal criminal charges. Or if not, if already during trial, or perhaps during the stage of application for warrant of arrest, or filing of information, um, the court may, issue an order to or a subpoena uh, towards the telecom company. So it will give away some details about the mobile number concerned. Now, what are the punishable acts under this new law, so-called Republic Act 11934? As per my reading, the punishable acts actually include the following: failure to, failure or refusal to register, breach of confidentiality, intentional or by negligence, the use of false or fictitious information or identity, or the use of fraudulent IDs in SIM card registration, spoofing, okay, spoofing a registered SIM card. What else? Sale of a stolen SIM card. Also punishable is sale and transfer of a registered SIM card without registration. So those are the punishable acts under this new law, the Republic Act 11934. So as we asked earlier, uh, will Republic Act 11934 actually work? We created a hypothetical scenario of us receiving a death threat, and we said we will first screenshot the electronic evidence and we'll file blotter or police report and complaint And the PNP will now, or as per this law, the PNP will now write formally the telecom company of the user to request for the account details of the mobile number used, and after obtaining detail, particularly the address and particularly the name of the subscriber, this will now facilitate filing of formal charges, formal criminal and civil charges against said perpetrator. And uh, uh, after after this, we ask ourselves, how do you actually register now? How do we actually register? For new accounts, we register at the point of sale. Okay, we register at the point of sale. For existing accounts, we have 180-day period to register. We have to bring valid ID and photo to be able to register. For minors, how about minors? We are supposed to register minors under the name of their parents or their guardians. That's for minors. What are the problems and issues as per this particular new law? Um, some telecoms actually want the national ID system to be sped up. No, so there will be no need for them to establish another database or a new database to store biometrics data just for this, registration. You see, creating another database will be expensive on their part. Creating or maintaining another database will be expensive on their part. However, we ask, aren't these companies earning enough already? Uh, I think they should have other reasons, other reasons other than the expense, because I know we all know that they are actually earning so much, already uh, from us, the subscribers. I think a better reason would be that actually this database could actually get hacked, could actually get hacked by professional expert hackers, and actually sold to the dark web. So this system, creating another database, could actually be exploited by people because, as we know, there's money in information. You know that very well. Selling information is, you know, lucrative. So we can expect hackers to take advantage of this. Okay. Also, telecoms actually will need more time. Another problem is telecoms or telecommunication companies will need more time to create a sound biometrics database. Uh, a sound biometrics data or database for the safety of the data therein. So if we expect the system to be safe and full proof, we must give them more time. Okay. All right. Um, there are also freedom of speech and privacy concerns, particularly state surveillance. Um, some critics are saying that uh, this new law, could be used, could be weaponized, to target perceived enemies of the state, particularly, journalists, human rights, defenders. Um, for journalists, there is fear that their sources of information which is usually classified information. The sources could get compromised, and they might be required to reveal said sources. But as far as I know, journalists are actually, they cannot be compelled, to provide information about their sources. It's part of their, it's part of their, privilege. It's privileged communication. All right. As per the new law, being a type of surveillance system, we ask, how will it become a surveillance method? Well, according to Friederike Koltener of London, she's actually director for technology and human rights at Human Rights Watch. According to her, this law will eradicate the potential for and communications. Anonymity of communications. This new law will eradicate the potential for anonymity of communications, enabling location tracking and simplifying communication surveillance and interception by allowing the state to know the identity of the owner of the SIM card, and thus who is most likely making a call or sending a message at any given time. So that's the concern, because we can access the identity of the owner of the account. Then we can monitor actually who is making the call or who is making the communication at any given time. If the account is active, that means that the owner of the account is the one making a communication, and because of that, it will be easier to track, easier to make a surveillance. But how about safeguards? Constitutional safeguards in this particular law. This new law actually requires, as we said earlier, court order, subpoena, you know, for for us to be able to obtain data, you know, pertaining to a particular account, uh, a particular account subscribed to a particular telecom company, and it will also require law enforcement officers to write a formal letter just for them to acquire said information or data, and only in relation to an existing to an existing investigation. But again, the fear is being able to track all this, inf- you know, being able to track ownership of these accounts would make it really possible for people who actually have power, people who are in power, you know, to actually bypass all these legal, requirements. They could bypass it and actually just do away with it, and that's the fear. Actually, they could bypass and abuse the power, and could directly access all this information. According to the Constitution, privacy of communication and correspondence shall be inviolable except upon lawful order of the court or when public safety or order requires. So apparently, indeed, there is a kind of a safeguard in this particular law. So the Constitution provides that uh, if there is lawful order from the court, then okay, it's okay. Um, how about request, written request from law enforcement agency. I think it's permissible. It's permissible. It could be connected with the so-called lawful order of the court, but then we have to check it out. If people might wanna check the constitutionality or test the constitutionality of this law, then we will find out if this portion of the law that says that pertaining to the ownership, no, pertaining to the ownership of a particular account, um, we need to find out if the same is actually permissible under the Constitution, or if the same is constitutional. Uh, is this valid? We will find out if there's a test case filed before the Supreme Court to check the constitutionality of this uh, portion of the law, because the Constitution only provides for lawful order of the court. But I think in the process of acquiring warrant of arrest, mm, the law enforcement agency concerned could already request the court to actually make a lawful order to uh, obtain information or data in relation to a particular account. Now, we were saying something about a theoretical situation where we received a death threat or something like that. Now, suppose after verification by law enforcement, etc., we find out that the number actually belongs to no one. Um, Actually, the critics, some critics of this law, including my good high school classmate, Attorney Jam Elakov, is actually uh, some critics are actually saying that scammers, violators, etc., could just use another mode or platform instead of using, texting or SMS or prepaid cards, SIM cards. They could just move to another platform, or, for example, use other methods, VPN, for example, or some online texting sites that actually do not require prior registration or prior account registration. For example, uh, online texting websites like Textem, Open Texting Online. These are examples, by the way. Open Texting Online, Text Drop, Anonymous SMS. So what if the scammers or the violators or the perpetrators just shift to these platforms so that they become untraceable? They could easily do that actually. So when we verify, using this particular law, we might just find out that the number actually belongs to no one because the number is spoofed, so to speak. For instance, if you avail of this particular site, Anonymous SMS, this site could actually spoof a phone number that will show on the other person's screen, you know, like a fake phone number. But then we mentioned that one of the punishable offenses under this law is spoofing a registered SIM card. But I think this is a different case. It's when you actually use, I think, a registered SIM card, you know, to commit, a crime. For example, you spoof a registered SIM card and you use it to say send uh, a threatening message to this person. You're using another person's number or something like that. Spoofing. Um, but then, if you use anonymous SMS, supposedly you can spoof you could actually spoof a phone number, and that phone number, a fake phone number, will show on the other person's screen, and of course you will not be traceable because that phone number doesn't belong to anyone. It's a temporary phone number. Needless to say, apparently this new law only applies to prepaid SIM cards, not on registered ones or postpaid what postpaid accounts. And cursory reading would provide us, would teach us, or would tell us that this law actually has a very high penalty, as high as 4 million. Now the question now is, will this law be a kind of a violation of freedom of speech? Uh, we leave that to lawyers who will actually what will actually challenge the constitutionality of this law. Lawyers will file a test case before the Supreme Court to check on the constitutionality of this law. But for the sake of discussion, when we say freedom of speech, there are actually some requisites, some legal tenets that we have to think of. For example, prior restraint and subsequent punishment. For a measure to constitute as a violation of freedom of speech, um, there must be prior restraint and subsequent punishment. Okay. Prior restraint actually means official government restrictions on the press or other forms of expression in advance of actual publication or dissemination. So, meaning to say, there's already prior restraint before you actually make the speech or the article, before you actually publish the article, before you actually utter the the supposed speech or expression. There's already prior restraint. For example, in publications, there's already an ordinance or a law which actually defines or designates spaces for selling newspapers. Yeah, an ordinance that says you are not allowed to sell newspapers in this particular area and only in this area, something like that. You could actually challenge the constitutionality of that measure, ordinance, or law on this ground, prior restraint, because it's a kind of prior restraint. It's like telling you uh, in advance before you actually make the publication that you are not to distribute publications in this particular area, as if the content of the publication would be detrimental to the state before said publication is even actually done or even actually publicized. I mean, it's a publication. Uh, Even before the publication actually comes out, they're already, you know, making rules that would prevent you from doing so. So it's actually a government action that prohibits speech or other expression before the speech actually happens. And then subsequent punishment, if there is a uh, subsequent punishment is, of course, if there is punishment or a punitive measure um, after the prior, after publication, after the utterance of the speech or expression. Another tenet, aside from the, or another legal tenet that we must think about, aside from the prior restraint rule or the subsequent punishment rule, is the clear and present danger rule. Because as far as we know, um, it's only valid to actually regulate speech and expression when there is clear and present danger. Meaning to say, there is a clear and present danger or evil of a substantial character that the state has a right to prevent. For example, uh, right there in Manila, there's already a danger of civil unrest, societal collapse, and civil disobedience. Uh, Everyone is now rioting. There's now mm, without there's no more rule of law, etc. And here you are. For example, you are a very influential YouTuber, and you are you know live and adding fuel to the fire, and you're saying, "Down with the government! It's time that it's time that we take over, or to hell with the greed. Let's go off grid. To hell with the system," something like that. You're adding fuel to the fire right at the moment when everyone is rioting at the capital. Then you could be liable because there is a clear and present danger already. There's already rioting. There's already uh, civil disobedience. Police officers are being attacked, something like that. You know, looting everywhere, and here you are. Adding fuel to the fire and saying, "This is what we've been waiting for. No rule of law, and uh, we are survivalists, and we are preppers. We're ready for this, and to hell with government, to hell with the state." That's what you're saying and all that, and then you could be liable of sedition or something, right? So that's it. Okay. Prior restraint, subsequent punishment, clear and present danger. Will the new law, Republic Act 11934, or the SIM card Registration Act work? Okay, we actually created a scenario. For instance, we receive a death threat and we avail of this law. What do? We screenshot the electronic evidence. We file a police blotter, police report, and the police officers will now write, as per this law, will now write the telecom company where the user is a member of and request for the account details of the mobile number, and will now file criminal charges formally. Or the court could, via lawful court order, or via subpoena, even habeas data, could actually request for information pertaining to that particular number that was used in a crime. For instance, let me try to recall. For instance, used for libelous remarks, grave threat, defamation, uh, sexual harassment, or scams. So there. The punishable acts under this law, we are to mention failure, refusal to register, breach of confidentiality, use of false or fictitious information or identity or fraudulent IDs in SIM card registration, spoofing a registered SIM card, sale of a stolen SIM card, sale and transfer of a registered SIM card without registration. So those are the punishable acts under this law. How do we register? For new accounts at the point of sale, I guess the SIM card sellers outside will have some form. This particular form, you have to fill them out, and then you have to provide valid ID and photo. For existing accounts, we have 180 days to register. You can actually ask for extension with legal ground. For minors, they ought to be registered under the names of their parents or guardians. However, as we said, this law actually has some issues, problems, etc. For instance, telecommunication companies, they want the national ID system to be sped up because it is supposed to augment the database that they will be creating. Or the national ID system along with the passport system will be used. They want to use said system so that they no longer so they won't need to establish another database to store biometrics data because said biometrics or said database is actually expensive to maintain. They could get hacked and sold to the dark web, or they could get exploited. Um, there. So also telecoms are actually asking for more time so that they could actually make sure that the data will be protected. That the integrity of the database will be sound and effective. Um, what else? Other issues and problems. Some people are saying this is a kind of violation of our freedom of speech and privacy, a kind of surveillance, to target perceived enemies of the state, particularly journalists. They could be forced to actually reveal their sources. And we said earlier that I think uh, that won't really happen because journalists are not actually, they cannot be compelled to actually reveal their sources, especially if it will endanger the lives of said source. Okay, we asked how will it be a kind of a state surveillance, and according to this person named Frederike Calthoner, she is actually from Europe, from UK, and she's director for technology and human rights and human rights director for technology and human rights at Human Rights Watch. She's saying that this measure will allow the state to know the identity of the owner of the SIM card and thus who is actually most likely making a call or sending a message at any given time. Anyway, there are actually safeguards in the law as per the Constitution, need for court order, and as we said earlier, there's a portion in the law which actually says that law enforcement agencies could just write written requests and they could be provided with the data needed. But then we said maybe this portion should be tested. We don't know as per a case test case before the Constitution, before the Supreme Court. Sorry, uh, uh, there could be a test case filed to uh, find out if this portion is constitutional. And also, we said that still there's a danger of these safeguards being bypassed by the powers that be. And also, another issue is if the scammer, the violator, or the perpetrator is using VPN and other, for example, online international SMS providers like Texem, Open Texting Online, Texttrap, Anonymous SMS. This website is very, you know, notorious because it could spoof a phone number that will show on other person's screen. As per this law, this website is a point of interest. Um, as we said, this particular law actually apparently just applies to prepaid SIM cards, and it has a penalty as high as 4 million. Will it violate freedom of speech really? Will there be prior restraint? We said, I think, well, we'll leave this to the lawyers if they want to test the constitutionality of this law. But as a matter of discussion, because Article 3 of the Civil Code provides that ignorantia lex non excusat, ignorance of the law excuses no one from compliance therewith. So we say that for the sake of argument or for the sake of discussion, apparently there is no prior restraint really, because we are actually not being prohibited from sending messages to anyone. There could be prior or there could be subsequent punishment, but no prior restraint actually, because prior restraint actually means government action that prohibits speech or other expression before the speech actually happens, right? And actually, there is no clear and present danger, something like that. Clear and present danger actually still applies. So, apparently, no violation of freedom of speech because there's no clear and present danger to prevent anyway. Jason here for the Hagbayon Channel and TMS Talks. It was fun, talking about this new law. Remember, the pen is mightier with the sword. Thanks for watching and thanks for joining me for half an hour. Thanks and good night.